So it's been a super busy offseason. We've had, things happening across the league. We've had some really, really big trades, with Giannis, with LaMelo, I guess with Julius Randle too, because I mean, that includes Minnesota. And we've had a few smaller ones here and there. We just had that Lou Dort one. But the one we're all really waiting on is LeBron. And I'm not sure when it's going to happen because a lot of people were speculating today. Then I just saw a bunch of stuff about how it's not going to get posted. But in my opinion, three out of these five teams that he could potentially go to, I think he could significantly have a chance to actually have like a huge impact on them and give them a chance to win a championship, especially the last two. So I'm really excited to see where LeBron's gonna go. Personally, for me, I hope he doesn't drag it out too much longer. Not because I don't understand. It just feels like there's a certain point where it's like, well, the closer you get to the regular season, what is that gonna change? Because I don't think too many of these teams are gonna be adding new people. I mean, Miami, they already added Giannis a little while back ago. I think Cleveland is staying pat. LaMelo's already in Minnesota, and Randall's out. Golden State, maybe they go after a smaller player, but I don't see them going after anybody else. And Philly, I mean, Philly just got Jalen Brown. So most of these teams have actually made some pretty big moves. Minnesota, Philly, and Miami. All of those teams have made big moves. So I don't know what he's waiting for, but maybe he's got something else going on in his camp though. But what I want to really, check in on is each of these teams and what type of impact he'll have. Because I think it'll be very different across the board. I think the top two, similar kind of goals, similar type of expectations, but there are little different things with some of the players that they got. And I think the first one I want to talk about is got to be Miami because, or not Miami, my bad, is Golden State. Because personally for me, I think this is the one that's the least likely to happen and the one that I'm kind of least looking forward to. Not because it wouldn't be like a fun storyline, because I think, okay, if you just have Curry, LeBron, Draymond, that's gonna be a fun show to watch. It'll be fun to watch Christmas Day. It'll be fun to see if they're in the playoffs and they get to compete with some people. But my thing is the reason why I feel like this is kind of boring, even though it looks interesting on the surface level, is there's no route for this team to be successful. And this isn't me just trying to like hate on the Warriors because I'm not the biggest Warriors fan. It's more about the fact that if you really look at the West right now, Golden State might be lucky to make the play in. And I know that sounds crazy because Jimmy's going to be back healthy for next season. But there are a few too many teams competing next year that I feel like even with LeBron, it just cuts it a little too close. And it's like, well, what's the point of not being in LA anymore? And I know it wasn't really 100% his choice because the front office obviously wanted to move on, make it more about Luca. But what's the point of going to LA to staying in the Western Conference and going to a team that's still probably worse, even with just Reeves alone? Like, I think Golden State is a worse team than LA with Reeves than even with Luca. If it's Luca there and Reeves, then yeah, it's way, way better. So, personally, for me, Warriors don't sound great, even though there might be some interesting kind of, play between obviously Curry and LeBron and Draymond and him. But I think at best, if I'm being honest, and this is my fifth pick for where I feel like he should go, at best, at best, they could somehow get a first round win. And I don't even know how that's possible because I can't see them being the sixth seed. So does that mean they have to take down OKC or San Antonio? Fuck no, that's not happening. And Minnesota too. I'm not seeing them beat Minnesota, even if they got LeBron, Curry, and everybody's healthy. So I don't think it's a smart choice. But again, I think this is pretty low on his kind of thing too. I felt like if he was gonna go, he would have went in the mid-season. When everyone was talking during the mid-season trade deadline, didn't end up happening. This kind of feels like just something people are trying to manufacture. But if he does go there, I mean, it'll be cool to see Curry and LeBron. But I think another team, not on similar lines because he's got tons of history with Cleveland. He's got a lot of history with success, with some failures here and there, a lot of drama. Is Cleveland, and for me personally, the reason why I say it kind of falls on the same lines, even though there's very, very different stories going on, is the fact that it just doesn't feel like the right time anymore. And with Golden State, it's not the right time either because that was the team that you were competing with. But for me, the reason why I feel like Cleveland just doesn't make sense anymore is I think if LeBron was to retire in Cleveland, it would have happened one of two ways. It would have either happened that he stayed in Cleveland when he came back for a second time, he won a championship, went to multiple finals, and he would have just decided, I don't know which way the team is gonna go. I know Kyrie's out. I know we're bringing in a bunch of new people like Wade and D Rose and Isaiah Thomas, like a ton of new people, but just staying with it. And I think the only other chance that he would have actually gone back to Cleveland and it would have made sense is if he had gone back to Cleveland maybe a year or two after he won that championship in LA. Because I think a lot of people forget how shaky that first year in LA was. It was shaky. They had a lot of young players. LeBron was injured. They didn't make the playoffs. And then, 2020, huge trade for AD. They win the championship. And then after that, it's been kind of weird. Like, I'm not saying they haven't had any success because they had a really cool run where they were the seventh seed, played the Denver Nuggets, which probably was in 2023 because I think it was the Western Conference Finals when the Nuggets won that year. And it just feels like there's just been very, very little success or very little progress for this LA team since that 2020 championship. And again, amazing to get any championship alone. You can't scoff at that. You can't poo-poo at that because that's the only championship for LA, and that's one championship that a lot of other teams in the NBA can't say in an era of parity. So I think personally, it would have made more sense in either of those two situations. And a big reason for me being kind of anti LeBron going to Cleveland, even though it'd be kind of like the simple storybook, like nice way to finish things off, is because they already have something going on. And one thing I've been like a big, big fan of and really try to give more credit to with this Cleveland team is after the first time when LeBron left in what 2009 slash 10, whichever year I guess you kind of count since it overlaps or whatever, the team was destroyed. The team was awful. It was trash for years and years and years. It wasn't good until he came back. It wasn't even okay. Like the whole time Kyrie was there, the team was shit. So like it was a different situation. And the reason why I give them so much credit is the second time LeBron ended up leaving, leaving after 2018, going to LA, the team actually turned it around pretty quickly. I know they had that one really bad season in 2019 and maybe there was another in 2020, but you got to understand, like, this is the best player in the world still at that point with a team that didn't even have their second best player in Kyrie anymore. So they didn't have any young talent really, besides maybe a few people here and there, which I honestly don't even know. I can't remember if Laurie was in Cleveland at that point because I think Laurie had like a short stint or maybe another young star, but they were able to turn around pretty quick. They got Jared Allen from a trade. They drafted Evan Mobley. They got Donovan Mitchell. They drafted Darius Garland, and they actually turned it into something good. And that's why I feel like it just doesn't make sense. Like they've built something so far separate from what happened with LeBron that it just feel kind of weird for him to come into a situation, especially with them already having a vet because they already have, James Harden to be that guy to help out. And I know, again, a lot of people are going to say, what's James Harden really doing for vet leadership? And maybe they got some, truth to that. But at the same time, I just don't think it would fit even just like play style wise. Because you got James Harden, who's super ball dominant, Donovan Mitchell, who can shoot off ball, but is still pretty ball dominant. And you already have a really full roster. Like Cleveland isn't playing like five or six people. They're playing like 8 to 9 to 10 people. And even though it's LeBron, I just feel like it'd be an awkward matchup. And I think it honestly sour like some of the stuff that, he was able to leave on good graces on. Because the first time when he left, yeah, everyone hated him. They didn't like him. They was burning his jerseys. But when he left in 2018, I feel like the consensus around the NBA was, okay, I understand. I understand you brought a championship. There's really nothing else that you really owe. And I feel like him just having like a weird ending where the team might not work out and it's like all this pressure to have a farewell tour and be successful in it. And it just probably wouldn't end up well. So personally for me, Cleveland is probably the fourth option. And I would say the third option out of all the teams is the Heat. And the reason for me is one, I like the connection. And I know I was just talking about how Cleveland's connection might get kind of in the way, but the reason I like Miami and his connection with that more is for two reasons. One of them is the fact that they've already changed the team before he got there. Like making a trade for Giannis and getting rid of like half of their roster already shows that they're moving into a new era. So bringing in LeBron would just add to this new era, and I think that'd be fine. And then the other reason why I feel like it'd be a better situation than Cleveland is it just feels a little weird sometimes to think about, the note that he ended on in Miami, because I know people talk about the championships. I know people talk about the success and everything that happened with that team because they were two-time champions. But I feel like in their like totality, they don't get talked about much during LeBron's career. Like I personally feel like people talk about early LeBron, back in the early 2000s, in that one year in the 2010s, more than they talk about the whole like entire part of LeBron's Miami run. And again, they talk about the championships a ton: 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014, but not in the season. I feel like people just talk about Cleveland LeBron in the 2000s more. And it was kind of a sour note to end on too. It was nice to have Cleveland just have that kind of all fixed up with the relationship when he won the championship, and he kind of left Miami on weird terms. Not in the same way as LA, because I think LA, it was just kind of all business at that point. Moving on with Luca, it just didn't really feel right. So I'm hoping he gets a chance to go back to Miami and end his career with a team that's already going to retire his jersey regardless, and they could be pretty competitive. I think out east, honestly, I'd put them at like a top 5 team if he was there. Right now, maybe sixth, seventh, even with Giannis, but I definitely put him top 5. Top 3 might be pushing it a little bit, but I wouldn't be surprised if they finish third. And even though the lineup itself is kind of like I don't really like an idea of Bam, LeBron, and Giannis. Like defensively, amazing. It's gonna be so physical. It's gonna be hard to get to, but just how that ends up working with shooting and people finding space, like it might not work out that great. But I think everything else, like this team would be fun, it'd be exciting, it'd be cool to see him back in Miami. And I think it's also a nice place for him to retire, because you also got to think about this. This has to be LeBron's last team, right? Like unless, unless we're getting like something out of the blue where he says, "Oh, I'm signing 1 year, and then I'm signing another 1 year to officially end in Cleveland or officially end here." I think this would be a good spot for him to have his last one. But I don't think it creeps up into the top 2 like these next ones, because I think these next ones, they're the ones that I really feel like should be where LeBron goes, and where I feel like his legacy, would benefit the most because he'd actually have a chance to win the championship. And I think the first one for me is got to be LeBron with the Wolves. I think this one's been talked about a ton, especially with LaMelo going over there. They need a power forward. And I gotta be honest, this will probably be the most fun team. Maybe the one I have ahead of this might be a little more fun, but I think this one is gotta be the most fun team, because you look at how well people complement each other on that team. You've got someone who can handle the ball, pass really well like LaMelo. You've got a number 1 scorer. You got somebody who can average 30 every single year he's in the NBA from now on. And you've got a lot of great pieces around them too. Like it's not just 3 or 4 amazing players, and then there's just a huge drop off. Like I love Jaden McDaniels. Rudy Gobert played amazing defense in the playoffs, and they have a few solid players around the edges too. Like Ayo, like Terrence Shannon Jr. Hopefully Isaiah Evans. I don't know, based on his summer league, performance. But I think this team could be really solid, and I feel like LeBron would just elevate every single part of that. Like if LeBron was there at that power forward spot, he'd add an amazing level of facilitation at that spot and at that position. He'd be just as physical, if not more physical, than Randall at that spot. And then the IQ would be the biggest difference. I think what I like about LaMelo is he can create a lot from nothing, because he's just such a creative player. He knows how to find people in weird spots. But the reason why it'd be nice to have a player like LeBron to kind of balance that out is LaMelo can kind of be all over the place sometimes. Like it's a give and take. You get that creativity, you get the flair, you get everything that you want to see, with some of these highlights, but you also deal with a ton of mistakes when it comes to LaMelo. Like he can be very turnover prone. He can be someone who can jack up threes, and I feel like having a veteran presence, someone with probably the best IQ in the NBA I've seen outside of maybe Chris Paul, would just help so much to calm things down. Because honestly, I feel like that's been Minnesota's biggest downfall. It's been, being mentally sound throughout the regular season and throughout the playoffs, because you see how good they play in the playoffs and are able to turn it up, but then they really struggle to put themselves in a good position seeding wise, and I think that's kind of impacted them. And you can also see once they get up against like really tough competition, whether it's the Spurs, the Mavs 2 years ago, or OKC a year ago, they just don't really have it. And I think LeBron will be the difference maker. So I'd love to see him there. I think play style wise, it'd be amazing. And also, he'd be able to bring the first championship to a city. Like, that can't be understated how much that means. You know, Denver winning for the first time, OKC winning for the first time, and even New York, who didn't win for the first time, won for the first time in 50 years. It showed how much it meant to the city. And I feel like LeBron, could be the guy to move that forward. And personally, for me, I'd have Minnesota. They'd be battling out for that top three. I still think San Antonio and OKC would edge them out, but I feel like it'd be kind of like a 2024 situation where technically OKC was the one seed, but Denver and Minnesota were like one game, 2 games back of them. Like I could see that back and forth between all three of those teams, and I'd have them in front of the Nuggets. I'd have in front of LA for sure, in front of the Rockets, in front of everybody but those other two teams. So I'd love to see them in Minnesota, and again, it'd be a cool mentorship role too for a guy like Anthony Edwards. But my number one team, it has to it has to go to Philadelphia. It has to. And my reason one is I'm just biased. I like Philly the most out of all of these teams, and I do feel like what like the history has shown in these past 7 or 8 years is bringing together something really quickly, a team that has like really good chemistry, has really good talent across the board. It can get you to a championship in just 1 year. And I know that holds true for Minnesota too, but Minnesota's kind of been building something for a while it feels like, with the really big addition of Jalen Brown, they're heading more into a different direction because I think Joel Embiid, people kind of see the foot in and out of the door, even though I've really liked Joel Embiid even when he's had injury prone seasons. And the reason why I like LeBron so much on this team is the fact that he can do everything he can do for Minnesota, but I'd argue the talent level is a little bit better. And it's really splitting hairs. It really is because you look at Jalen Brown and he's not a carbon copy of Anthony Edwards, but it's close. It's close. Ant is definitely more athletic, is a better shooter, is a better scorer, but it's not a huge difference. But that number two option, like the number two option, they're choosing between Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey as the number two. Like that's an insane option to choose from. So let's just put this to the side because I know people hate it when people say it, but let's just say Joel is okay. Like he's not super healthy, but he's like moderately healthy. I'm gonna say Tyrese Maxey would usually be the number two. Maxey as a number two, as opposed to LaMelo as a number two, is a big difference. I'd argue maybe LaMelo complements Ant a little bit better than Maxey does with Jalen Brown because the positions just don't mesh as well. But I'm just thinking about the talent level on that team with VJ Edgecombe, and for me too, a rookie that I'm super high on, LeBron Philon, coming off the bench, especially with Quentin Grimes not being on that team. I think it's going to be a huge difference maker because we've already seen how much a guy like Dylan Harper can affect a team even with other guards in front of him. And I think Philon could add like a huge boost of offense when, Philly gets a little bit stagnant. So I'd love to see him there. And besides just the team fit, I think his play style, it fits basically anywhere. I mean, he can pass really well, has the best IQ in the NBA. That's not an issue for me. My thing is why I feel so high on Philly, especially even over Minnesota, is it kind of aligns with what we already know about what decision he was kind of going to make. Like, there was hints, or not just hints, there was like a definite answer from Rich Paul that he said that if New York hadn't won the championship this year, which they did end up doing, shout out New York, uh, LeBron would have went to New York in this offseason because, it's a big market and he wanted to get them their first championship in a long time. And that fits directly with what Philly has going on. Now, it hasn't been 50 years, but it's been 40 years. The last time they won, it was Dr. J, it was Moses Malone, it was a lot of other players I don't know the name of, and it was all the way back in the early 80s versus the Lakers. And then, bring it all the way back again to the 2000s, and that was the last time that they were actually in the finals, and, they ran into a juggernaut. So I think it aligns so much with what he wanted from that New York option. It's a big city, haven't won in a long time, and I think it's realistic. Like, to me, even with LeBron not being there, I'm putting Philly as the number one seed. I'm not going to say they outright win the East because the playoffs, it's a different beast. Like, Cleveland 2 years ago was the number one seed. Detroit was the number one seed last year, and they kind of just they just weren't there. They weren't there. You know, we saw them struggle against Orlando, and they still clearly have some deficiencies. I would put this team as number one. This Philly team to me would be number one with LeBron. They'd be heavy favorites for me to win the Eastern Conference. And I'm not trying to disrespect New York or what they did, but I just feel like what he'd be able to do, in addition to what they got added in Jalen Brown instead of having PG, it would just be too much for any team in the East. And I would say with LeBron, they'd be like on the same level as San Antonio and OKC going into next year for like championship odds. So I'm really excited to see what team he ends up going on. Personally, for me, I really hope he makes this decision within the next week or the next 2 weeks. I know a lot of people were saying it was going to happen today, but honestly, I just want it to happen soon because again, like I was saying at the beginning of the video, what are we waiting for? There's nothing gonna happen in the next like month or 2 months or 3 months, like right before the season that really should change too much because you know the top three teams I was talking about, Miami, Philly, Minnesota, all of those teams already made their big move. So he can see where the team is going. He can see the direction. It's just a matter of like what is holding him back from making this decision. And maybe what it really is that he truly believes this last spot is his last spot. This is where he's going to retire, which to me, I guess I can understand that because 23 years in the NBA, you want to be smart about your last spot, where you're going to leave your legacy. And personally, for me, I'd have to rank it Warriors, Cleveland, Miami, Minnesota, and then Philly. Not a big difference between Philly and Minnesota. I'd say honestly, the gap of 1 and 2 between 3, 4, and 5 is a lot bigger, but I'll probably have Philly number one. So I'm really excited to see where it goes, and hopefully we find out pretty soon.